Today, we are not just traveling geographically. We are traveling in time.
Very much so.
We're heading to the Peak District in the UK, to a building that sits on a limestone ridge overlooking the River Wye in Derbyshire.
Yes, and we should probably get that pronunciation out of the way right at the top.
Absolutely. It is Derbyshire with an R sound, like in car, not Derbyshire.
If you say Derbyshire, every local will immediately and correctly assume you're a tourist.
They will. And the place we're going to, Haddon Hall, is, well, you said it before we started recording, it's unique in English architecture.
It is, and without any exaggeration. When you think of a stately home, you usually think of places like Chatsworth or Blenheim Palace.
Right, massive places that were constantly being updated. You know, the drill, the Georgians come in, they hate the small, drafty medieval windows.
No, they rip them out and put in huge, light-filled sash windows.
And the Victorians show up and say, this is terribly inconvenient, we need servants' corridors, and for heaven's sake, some central heating.
Exactly. Most historic houses are what we call palimpsests. They're just layers of history written on top of each other. You can see the 12th century, then the 15th, then the 18th and 19th, all sort of jumbled together.
They evolve.
They evolved to suit the creature comforts of whoever was living there at the time.
But Haddon Hall is different. And this, I have to say, this is the hook that grabbed me when I was going through this stack of architectural reviews and historical archives we have for today. Haddon Hall. It didn't evolve. It just stopped.
It went to sleep.
That's the perfect metaphor.
It's the one that comes up time and again in all the literature. It's the sleeping beauty of Derbyshire.
Literally. It was abandoned for over 200 years, wasn't it? From around, what, 1700?
From about 1700 all the way to the 1920s. Just locked up and left.
And that abandonment is the absolute key to understanding everything we're going to discuss today.
It is. Because the family moved out, they made their main home somewhere else, so nobody bothered to improve Haddon.
So when you walk through the gates today, you're not seeing a Victorian romanticized version of what they thought the Middle Ages looked like.
No, you're seeing the real thing. It is an authentic, untouched time capsule.
Which makes it the perfect subject for our mission today. We have a massive stack of sources here. We've got Victorian travel guides, architectural surveys, local folklore collections, historical biographies, the works.
A lot to get through.
And we're going to use them to unpack three main things. First, the reality of that long sleep. How a house can actually survive and be preserved by being neglected.
And we can really get into the nitty-gritty of medieval life that the architecture shows us, things we just don't think about today, like the total lack of privacy.
Oh, absolutely. Second, we have to tackle the legend. The Romeo and Juliet of the Peak District.
Dorothy Vernon.
Dorothy Vernon. We have to figure out if her famous elopement really happened or if we've all been sold a very, very romantic bill of goods.
And we can look at the forensic evidence for that. You can literally check the dates on the stonework against the dates in the parish records.
Its history is detective work. I love it. And finally, we're going to the darker side. This house has stood still for 900 years. And it seems to have collected quite a few residents who never left. We are talking ghosts, witch marks burned into the actual walls, and a prophetic vision that might have genuinely changed the course of English history.
It's a heavy stack today. A lot of ground to cover.
So let's start at the very beginning, the foundations. Haddon Hall isn't technically a castle, is it? But when I look at pictures of it, it's got the battlements, it has a tower. It looks defensive.
It is a fortified manor house. And that distinction is it's actually quite important.
Okay.
A castle is primarily a military fortress. It's built for war. A fortified manor is a home first, a home that can defend itself if things get rough.
And in the 11th and 12th centuries.
Things very often got rough, yes.
We're going all the way back to the Norman conquest here, aren't we?
We are. The origins date back to a man named William Peveril in the 11th century. Peveril is a big name in the Midlands. He was, and this is important, the illegitimate son of William the Conqueror.
Right. Being the illegitimate son of the king, that has to be a high-risk, high-reward position to be in.
It is indeed. You get land, you get power, but your position is never fully secure. You always have to prove your loyalty.
So Peveril held the manor of Haddon around 1087, right at the time of the Doomsday Book.
He did. But the Haddon Hall we see today, the building that starts to take shape, really begins its transformation when it passes to the Vernon family in the 12th century.
And how did that happen?
Through marriage. As almost all property transfers did in the Middle Ages, Sir Richard de Vernon married a woman named Alice Avenel, the heiress, and the Vernons took control.
The Vernons then held it for centuries. But there's one Vernon in particular who seems to just dominate the history books and all the local legends.
Sir George Vernon,
The King of the Peak.
the King of the Peak.
That is a serious nickname. I mean, it implies a level of autonomy, a power that you don't usually see in a subject of the crown.
It does, and by all accounts, it was well-earned. We're in the 16th century now, the Tudor period. And you have to understand, Derbyshire was wild country.
It was remote.
Very remote. It was a long, long way from London. The roads were terrible, mostly just pack-horse tracks winding through the hills. So if you were the lord of a major estate like Haddon, you were, for all intents and purposes, the government.
You were the law.
You were the law. Sir George was known for his magnificent, almost over-the-top hospitality, but also his absolute authority.
When we say hospitality in the Tudor context, we're not talking about having a few friends over for drinks and some canapes.
No. We are talking about feeding the county. The Great Hall at Haddon, which you can still walk into today, and it looks almost exactly as it did in his time, would have been a sensory overload.
I can just picture it.
Imagine these long oak tables packed with retainers, tenants, important guests, travelers, anyone who needed a meal. We have records of the food consumption, massive amounts of beef, mutton, game, and just rivers of ale.
It's a display of power, isn't it? It's not just generosity.
It's pure power politics. If you could feed 500 people at a moment's notice, it meant you could also arm and lead 500 people. It was a statement.
It's hospitality as a deterrent. Look how rich and powerful I am. Don't even think about messing with me.
Precisely. He ruled his estate like it was his own little kingdom. Our sources say that if a poacher was caught on his land, Sir George didn't necessarily wait for a judge to ride up from London.
He handled it.
He handled it. That's where the King of the Peak title really comes from.
But even kings have succession problems.
Yeah.
And Sir George had no sons.
And that is the pivotal moment in the history of the house. He had 2 daughters, Margaret and Dorothy. In the 16th century, land followed the male line unless there were no males.
In which case, it's all about who the daughters marry.
Yes. It gets split or negotiated through marriage. And this is where the ownership of Haddon shifts from the Vernons to the Manners family.
Who eventually become the Dukes of Rutland.
Eventually, yes. In 1567, after Sir George's death, the estate passed to the Manners family because his daughter, Dorothy Vernon, had married John Manners.
And we will definitely get to how they married later, because that's the whole legend part. But legally, that was the moment. A new era for Haddon Hall.
A new dynasty takes over.
And here's the irony. This transition to the hugely powerful Manners family is what eventually leads to the house being abandoned, which seems completely counterintuitive. You inherit this massive, powerful estate.
Yeah.
Why on earth would you just leave it?
It really comes down to the changing definition of what a house is supposed to be. By the time we get to the year 1700, the Manners family, who are now the Dukes of Rutland, had their main seat at Belvoir Castle in Leicestershire.
And Belvoir is a palace. I mean, it's grand, it's symmetrical, it's designed to impress.
And Haddon is, well, it's inconvenient. We have to really try and put ourselves in the shoes of an 18th century aristocrat to understand this.
Okay.
Haddon Hall is built around 2 courtyards. It grew organically over centuries. There's almost no central planning in the modern sense. It's a rabbit warren.
And the big sticking point that comes up in all the architectural surveys is corridors, right? Or the complete lack of them.
This is a fascinating detail that tells you so much about a different mindset. In the medieval period, privacy wasn't really a concept. Not in the way we think of it.
How so?
Well, if you were important, people were always around you. It was a sign of your status. To get from, say, the Great Hall to the parlor, you didn't walk down a corridor. You walked through other rooms.
So you'd have to walk through someone's bedroom.
You might walk through the bedrooms of your own family or your guests or your senior servants. Yeah.
So if I'm trying to sleep in the middle room of a sequence, people are just commuting through my bedroom all night.
Pretty much. And in the year 1500, that was normal. It reinforced the communal nature of the household and the hierarchy. But by 1700, the world has changed. The Enlightenment is happening.
The idea of the individual is on the rise.
Exactly. People want privacy. They want to be able to read a book alone. They want to be able to have a private conversation. They want to sleep without the butler walking through their room to get to the next one.
And they wanted to be warm.
Oh, that's a huge factor. Haddon sits on a limestone ridge. It's built of stone. It has these small leaded glass windows. It's dark and it is cold.
The Georgians wanted light. They wanted those big sash windows that let the sun flood in. They wanted high ceilings and a sense of space.
And Haddon was seen as a gloomy, barbarous relic of a dark, uncomfortable past. It was completely out of fashion.
So the Dukes of Rutland looked at Haddon and said, it's beautiful, but we're staying at Belvoir, where it's warm and we have hallways.
That's the gist of it. But, and this is the incredibly lucky part of the story, they were rich enough that they didn't need to sell Haddon. They didn't need to knock it down for stone.
I'll lock the door.
They just locked the door for 200 years.
It's still amazing to think about.
From about 1700 to the 1920s, it was used occasionally for storage. Maybe a retired servant lived in a couple of rooms, but by and large, it just sat empty.
And that neglect becomes the greatest preservation method of all time.
It is the ultimate preservation. Think about it. If they had been living there in, say, 1850, they would have torn out all the beautiful Tudor wood paneling because it was old-fashioned and dark.
They would have put up floral wallpaper.
Of course. They would have knocked down medieval walls to build a grand, sweeping staircase. They would have plastered over all the frescoes in the chapel. But because no one was there, the 20th century eventually found it exactly as the 17th century had left it.
It's an accidental museum.
Completely. Even the kitchens. You can walk into the kitchens at Haddon today and see the original butchery blocks, the giant baking ovens, the stone troughs that were used in the 1500s.
In almost any other great house in England, those would have been ripped out and replaced with Victorian cast iron ranges.
And the 1950s Oga cookers, and then modern stainless steel. At Haddon, they are just there, frozen in time.
So the Sleeping Beauty finally woke up in the 1920s. Who was responsible for that?
That was the 9th Duke of Rutland. He was a real antiquarian at heart. He looked at what he owned and realized that it wasn't an inconvenient old house. It was a national treasure.
So he decided to restore it.
He spent a lifetime on a meticulous restoration, and I really want to stress the word restoration, not renovation.
What's the difference?
He hired an architect named Harold Brackspear, who was one of the leading experts in medieval buildings. They didn't add modern features that didn't try to improve it. They stabilized the old ones. They repaired the roof with traditional materials. They carefully uncovered the wood paneling. The goal was to preserve, not to change.
And today, unbelievably, it's a family home again.
It is. It is the home of Lord Edward Manners and his family, which I find just mind-blowing.
Can you imagine raising kids in a house that is essentially unchanged since the time of Shakespeare?
Don't run in the Long Gallery. It's 400 years old.
I just hope they manage to install some decent Wi-Fi. But living in a museum like that, it must create a certain atmosphere. An atmosphere, as we know, breeds stories.
It certainly does.
Which brings us squarely to the big one, the legend. If you go to Derbyshire, you cannot escape the story of Dorothy Vernon. It's printed on the tea towels, it's in all the guidebooks, it's the Romeo and Juliet of the North.
It is the defining narrative of the estate for most visitors. It's what people come to see.
So let's do this properly. Let's tell the story first, the one that tourists hear, the big romantic tale, and then we can come in and ruin it with facts.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, set the scene.
The year is 1563. Dorothy Vernon is the beautiful, headstrong younger daughter of Sir George Vernon, the King of the Peak. She is deeply in love with a young man named John Manners.
But, as is always the case in these stories, there's a problem. The father disapproves.
The King of the Peak says no. The reasons for his disapproval vary depending on which version of the legend you read.
Okay, what are the options?
Sometimes it's about religion. The Vernons were staunchly Catholic, and the Manners family were Protestant, which was a huge deal in Elizabethan England. Other times it's financial. John was the second son of the Earl of Rutland.
So he wasn't going to inherit the main title or the biggest estates. He was the spare.
Exactly. So Sir George, this powerful man, sees him as not good enough for his daughter.
So Dorothy is forbidden from seeing him. She is effectively a prisoner in her own magnificent home.
Until one fateful night. It's the night of her older sister Margaret's wedding celebration. The house is filled with guests. There is a huge masquerade ball taking place in the Long Gallery.
Perfect. Everyone's drinking, dancing, wearing masks. It's chaotic.
The perfect cover for an escape. During the height of the festivities, Dorothy slips away from the crowd. She runs the length of the Long Gallery, pushes open a specific small side door, which is now famous as the Dorothy Vernon door.
Of course it is.
And she runs down an exterior flight of 11 stone steps into the dark garden.
Which are now called the Love Steps, I assume.
Naturally. She runs across the terrace gardens down to a little footbridge over the River Wye. And there, waiting in the shadows with 2 horses, is her beloved, John Manners.
He sweeps her up, and they ride off into the night to get married in secret.
They ride to Leicestershire and are married. It's cinematic, it's romantic, it's a story of love triumphing over parental tyranny.
It's a fantastic story.
It is, but when you start to look at the architectural evidence and the historical records, it almost certainly never happened.
All right, let the deconstruction begin. Start with the architecture. Where does it fall apart?
Well, the most damning piece of evidence is the very geography of the escape. That Dorothy Vernon door and those romantic love steps she supposedly fled down in the year 1563.
Yeah.
We can date the stonework. We know when that part of the building was constructed. They were built by John Manners, or possibly even his grandson, decades after the marriage took place.
Oh, so she couldn't have run through the door.
Because the door was a solid stone wall at the time.
That does put a bit of a damper on the legend.
Unless she had a sledgehammer hidden under her ball gown, yes. The escape route, as described in the story, simply did not exist in 1563.
Okay, so the setting is wrong. What about the plot? The feud? The disapproving father?
This is where you have to look at the social history of the Tudor aristocracy. John Manners was the second son, yes, but he was the son of the Earl of Rutland. In the rigid hierarchy of the 16th century, that is a great match.
It's a step up, surely.
A huge step up. The Vernons were powerful local gentry. The Manners were national-level aristocracy close to the throne. Sir George Vernon, the king of the Peak, was obsessed with status and power. Why would he turn down an alliance with the Earl of Rutland's family?
He wouldn't. He would have been thrilled. He would have been boasting about it.
Exactly. And the legal documents we have from the time support this. The marriage settlement was drawn up. It looks like a very standard, prearranged, contractual marriage between 2 powerful families. There's no hint of a feud.
And was she disinherited?
Not at all. In fact, when Sir George died just 2 years later, in 1567, Dorothy and John inherited Haddon Hall legally and peacefully. The whole thing seems to have been a very sensible business arrangement.
So it was a normal, possibly quite boring political marriage.
Most likely. And by all accounts, a happy one. They had children, they ran the estate well, but it wasn't a dramatic, rebellious elopement.
So where on earth did this story come from? If it's not true, who made it up and why?
We can pretty much squarely blame the 19th century tourism industry and the Romantic movement.
Okay, explain that connection.
Well, you have to remember the context of the 1800s. Haddon Hall was empty. It was this beautiful, overgrown, spooky ruin. The Romantics, your poets, your writers, your painters, they absolutely loved that aesthetic. A noble ruin was the height of fashion.
But a ruin needs a good story. A pile of stones is just a pile of stones until you attach a ghost or a tragic love story to it.
Precisely. You need a narrative to sell the atmosphere. And the first time we see this elopement story appear in print is in 1822. A writer named Alan Cunningham wrote a short story for a magazine, a historical fiction piece called The King of the Peak.
And he just invented the elopement.
He seems to have invented it out of whole cloth to make his story more exciting, pure fiction.
And then it took on a life of its own.
It snowballed. In 1860, another writer, Eliza Meatyard, wrote a book called The Love Steps of Dorothy Vernon. She actually visited the ruin, saw those steps that John Manners had built, and retroactively wove them into the fictional story. She cemented the geography of the myth.
And then came the blockbuster, the thing that made it world famous.
Charles Major. In 1902, he writes a novel called Dorothy Vernon of Haddon Hall. It became a massive international bestseller. It was like the Harry Potter or Twilight of its day. Everybody read it.
And once a story reaches that level of pop culture saturation, it effectively becomes truth in the public mind.
Absolutely. It was adapted into a hit play on Broadway. And then the final nail in the coffin of historical fact was in 1924.
The movie.
The silent film adaptation starring Mary Pickford. She was the biggest movie star on the planet at the time. Once you have millions of people watching Mary Pickford, America's sweetheart, running down those steps on the silver screen, you cannot tell the public it didn't happen. The visual is just too powerful.
It's a fascinating paradox. The house itself is preserved by neglect, but its most famous legend is preserved by fiction and Hollywood.
It's a perfect example of how we often prefer a good story over the plain truth. And the Victorian tour guides at the Hall, we have accounts from a caretaker named William Hague, they realized that their tips were much better if they told the romance story instead of the legal contract story.
Of course they were.
So they leaned into it. Hard.
Just because the romantic legend is false, that doesn't mean Haddon Hall is devoid of spirits. We've debunked the romance, but the sources we have on the supernatural activity, there are Well, they're a lot harder to explain away.
They are, and some of them are, frankly, historically profound.
So let's talk about Prince Arthur. Because this isn't just a creaky floorboard in the attic kind of ghost story. This is a story that, if you believe it, actually changed the world.
To set the scene, it's the very beginning of the 16th century, around 1501, 1502. Prince Arthur is the eldest son of King Henry VII. He is the Prince of Wales. He is the great hope of the new Tudor dynasty.
And his younger brother, Henry, the future Henry VIII, is just the spare. Not considered that important.
Exactly. Arthur's just been married to the Spanish princess, Catherine of Aragon. This marriage was the geopolitical event of the decade, a massive alliance between England and Spain.
And Arthur is staying at Haddon Hall.
Yes, the Vernons were loyal and important supporters of the Tudors. It was an honor to host the Prince of Wales. He's staying there shortly after his wedding.
So what happens?
The story, as it's been passed down, is that he was walking in the grounds near the chapel or a stone cross, and he had a vision.
A vision of what?
A spirit appeared to him, and it delivered a chillingly specific prophecy. The spirit told him that his new wife, Catherine, would soon be a widow.
Wow, that is blunt. Congratulations on the wedding, you're about to die.
It's terrifying. Arthur was reportedly deeply, deeply shaken by it, and the prophecy turned out to be horrifyingly accurate.
How soon after?
Arthur died just 4 months after his wedding, probably from this wedding sickness. He was only 15 years old.
Is there any record of him mentioning the vision?
The legend says that his last words were, "Oh, the vision of the cross at Haddon."
Oh, the vision of the cross at Haddon. That gives me actual chills.
Now think about the domino effect of that moment, the sheer historical consequence.
Okay, let's walk through it. If Arthur lives.
If Arthur lives, he becomes King Arthur II. He stays married to Catherine of Aragon. They likely have children, securing the Tudor line. His younger brother, Henry, remains a minor figure.
Henry VIII never becomes king. Or if he eventually does, he doesn't marry Catherine because she's his sister-in-law and queen.
Great. And if he doesn't marry Catherine?
He doesn't need to divorce her to marry Anne Boleyn.
And if he doesn't need a divorce, he has no need to break with the Pope in Rome.
No Church of England?
No English Reformation. No dissolution of the monasteries. The entire religious, political, and cultural map of Britain, and by extension the world, was completely redrawn because that one teenager died.
And a ghost at Haddon Hall called it 4 months in advance.
It suggests this weird kind of destiny or energy centered on this particular house, like it's a pivot point for history.
That's the huge capital H history ghost.
It is.
But there are more personal and arguably even stranger phenomena reported there too. The sources mention something called a time slip. Now, how is that different from a regular haunting?
A traditional haunting is usually described as an intelligent spirit that is stuck here. A soul wandering in the halls, perhaps trying to communicate. A time slip is a different theory entirely.
Go on.
It suggests that the witness, the living person, has momentarily stepped out of the present and into the past, or that the past has bled through into the present.
So you're not seeing a ghost. You're seeing a real, live person, but from 400 years ago.
Correct. You're an observer of a past event. And the most famous account of this at Haddon comes from a writer and researcher named Joan Foreman in the 1970s.
What was her experience?
She was visiting the hall just as a tourist standing in one of the courtyards. And she said that suddenly the sounds of the modern tourists around her just faded away. The air grew still. And she saw 4 children playing in the courtyard.
Okay, kids playing. That could just be other tourists' children.
That's what she thought at first. But then she started noticing the details were wrong. Their clothing was clearly period accurate from the 16th or 17th century, and she really focused on the eldest girl.
What did she look like?
She was about 9 years old. And Foreman gave a very specific description. She said the girl had a plain face, a very wide jawline, and was wearing a simple gray-green dress with a peculiar lace cap on her head.
And then what happened?
And then, just as suddenly as it began, the vision cut out. The modern sounds rushed back in, and the children were gone.
But she was a researcher. She didn't just leave it at that.
No. She went into the hall's archives. She started looking through the family portraits of the Manners family from that era, and she found a portrait of a child named Lady Grace Manners.
And let me guess.
It was the girl from the courtyard. The wide jaw, the plain features, the dress, everything matched. And Joan Foreman swore she had never seen that portrait before her experience.
So the theory here is it because Haddon Hall is so unchanged. because the stone walls, the cobblestones, the way the light falls in the courtyard are exactly the same as they were in 1600.
That the barrier between the times is somehow thinner there. That's the essence of the stone tape theory or the time slip theory. The idea that the physical environment is so perfectly preserved that it acts like a recording or maybe a window. The past isn't gone. It's just happening on a different frequency.
And occasionally at Haddon, the frequencies overlap.
That's the idea. It's a fascinating concept.
It makes you wonder if the children saw her. Do they suddenly see a strange woman in 1970s clothing appear and then vanish from their courtyard?
There are accounts in paranormal literature of so-called ghosts looking terrified of the living people observing them. Maybe to the past, we are the ghosts.
That is a brain-bending thought.
Yeah.
Now, not all the spirits at Haddon are scary or prophetic. There's a much gentler Christmas story, right?
Yeah.
Which feels very appropriate for a house that looks like it belongs on a Christmas card.
Yes, the Christmas ghost. This involves a different Lady Dorothy Manners from a later period. The story is set on a freezing Christmas Eve. She was alone in the hall. Her husband was away on business or at war.
In a blizzard, I presume.
Naturally. It's Derbyshire. The weather is always dramatic in these stories. A stranger, a weary traveler, knocked at the gates seeking shelter.
And she let him in.
She did. She took him in, fed him, gave him a place by the fire. She showed true, selfless hospitality, channeling that old King of the Peak spirit.
And the stranger turned out to be.
He was a benevolent spirit. Before he vanished, he blessed her and the house. He predicted that because of her kindness on that night, the Manners family would always be blessed with good fortune at Christmas.
It's very Charles Dickens, a Christmas Carol vibe.
It is. And it reflects the essential role of the great house in the community. In hard times, it was meant to be a place of shelter and charity.
But then, just to keep us on our toes, the sources also mention headless things. Why is it always headless things in English folklore?
The headless coachman. Yes, this is a legend that's more associated with the dark roads and lanes around Haddon rather than the hall itself.
What's the story?
It's the classic tale of a phantom coach, pulled by a team of headless horses and driven by a headless coachman seen galloping furiously on stormy nights.
It sounds like a generic trope almost.
It is a common trope, but I think it speaks directly to the landscape. The Peak District is treacherous. It has these steep limestone gorges, sudden thick fogs that roll in, winding, unlit roads. Death on the road, a carriage crash, was a very real and terrifying fear.
So the headless coachman is a manifestation of that danger.
It's the ghost of a bad commute, essentially.
Speaking of danger and fear, let's talk about witches. Because when I was reading through the architectural notes, I kept seeing this term, apotropaic marks. Now that sounds very academic, but what we're actually talking about is anti-demon security systems.
That's a perfect way to put it. Apotropaic comes from the Greek apotropan, which means to ward off evil. Colloquially, people call them witch marks, but it's crucial to understand they weren't made by witches. They were made against witches.
And Haddon Hall is covered in them.
It is absolutely teeming with them. If you know where to look, the very stones and timbers of the house are screaming with paranoia.
Okay, give us the guided tour. If we were walking through Haddon, what should we be looking for?
The most common one you'll find, and the easiest to spot, is the daisy wheel, or hexafoil. It looks like a 6-petaled flower, a simple geometric shape, carved into the stone or the wood.
And where we find them?
Near any opening to the outside world. Doors, windows, fireplaces. There's a very prominent one right at the entrance to the kitchens.
Why the kitchen specifically?
The kitchen is a hugely vulnerable point in a superstitious worldview. It's a threshold. Raw ingredients come in, food and waste go out. You don't want an evil spirit or witch's familiar getting into the food supply. You don't want the milk to curdle or the meat to rot because of a curse.
So how does a little flower carving stop a demon?
The belief was that evil spirits are, for some reason, compulsive. They are compelled to follow lines. If a demon encounters a daisy wheel, which is a single endless line woven into a complex circle, it gets trapped.
It's a maze.
It's a spiritual maze. The demon starts following the line of one petal, loops around, follows the next, and gets stuck in an infinite loop, unable to cross the threshold into the room.
It's spiritual flypaper.
Exactly. A brilliant, low-tech demon trap.
The sources also mention burn marks, deliberate scorch marks on the timber beams.
Yes. For many years, curators and historians thought these were just accidents. A servant holding a candle too close to an old oak beam, but then they started noticing the pattern.
They weren't random.
They weren't random at all. They are often teardrop-shaped from holding a flame against the wood, and they are always in specific vulnerable places. Again, near doors, windows, and especially on the big beams above the fireplaces.
So they're burning their own house on purpose. Why?
It's a form of sympathetic magic. It's like a vaccine. The idea is if you burn the timber slightly, if you give the house a little paste of fire in a controlled way, you are ritually inoculating it against a real catastrophic fire.
Whether that's from a stray spark or lightning.
Or from hellfire itself. You are essentially telling the universe, this wood has already been burned. You can't burn it again.
That is such a specific, desperate kind of logic. It really paints a vivid picture of the mental state of the people who lived there. They were terrified.
They lived in a world where the supernatural was a real physical threat. A cold draft wasn't just wind, it could be a spirit passing through. A sick cow wasn't just bacteria, it was a neighbor's curse. You needed these defenses built into the very fabric of your home.
And then there are the things they found inside the walls, the so-called cabinet of curiosities.
This, for me, is the creepiest part. During that big restoration in the 1920s, when they had to open up some of the old wall cavities to do repairs, they found items that had been deliberately hidden there centuries before.
What kind of items?
Old, worn-out shoes and a human skull.
A human skull.
Yeah.
Just packed into the wall insulation.
Hidden with clear intent. The theory regarding the skull, which is a practice found elsewhere in Britain, is that it serves as a guardian of the threshold. You bind a spirit to the wall to act as a supernatural watchdog for the door.
And the shoes. What's the logic there?
That's another common folk magic practice found across Europe. A shoe, especially a well-worn one, takes the exact shape of its owner's foot. It's believed to retain the essence or spirit of the person.
So as a decoy.
It's a spiritual decoy. The idea is if a demon or a witch is hunting you, sniffing out your spiritual trail, it might find the shoe hidden in the wall, think that it's found you, and attack the shoe instead. You sacrifice your old shoe to save yourself.
It's absolutely fascinating because when we look at Haddon today, we see this beautiful romantic building. But to the people living there in 1600, it was a fortress against the dark, both physical and supernatural. They were living in a state of spiritual siege.
And because the Georgians and Victorians never renovated the house, they never sanded these marks off the beams or plastered over the carvings. In most other houses, all this stuff was scraped away in the 18th century as superstitious nonsense. At Haddon, it's all still there, fresh as the day it was made.
There is one more place in the house that deals directly with death and the supernatural, and that's the Chapel of St. Nicholas.
A truly stunning space. It contains these incredible frescoes wall paintings that date back to the 15th century.
Which were whitewashed over during the Reformation, right?
Yes. When the Protestant Reformation swept through England, religious imagery was banned as idolatrous. So they painted over these beautiful, vibrant Catholic murals with a thick coat of white lime.
But in another stroke of Haddon's strange luck, that act of destruction was actually an act of preservation.
It was. The lime wash protected the paint underneath from light and air, so when it was carefully uncovered during the restoration in the 20th century, the colors were still remarkably vivid.
And there's one image in particular in that chapel that is, well, it's pretty heavy metal.
You're talking about the 3 living and the 3 dead.
Describe it for us.
It's a type of painting called a memento mori, a reminder of death. The fresco depicts 3 young, rich, arrogant-looking kings. They're out hunting, they're wearing fine clothes, they look powerful and on top of the world, and they stumble across 3 rotting skeletons in a graveyard.
That would certainly ruin a hunting trip.
And the skeletons are actually speaking to them. There was once text, now faded, but the message is a well-known one from this kind of art. The skeletons say, "As you are now, so once were we. As we are now, so you will be."
Death is the great equalizer.
It was a direct, unflinching message to the aristocracy. You might be the king of the peak. You might own all this land and command hundreds of men, but you will end up as a pile of bones in the dirt, just like the poorest peasant in your fields. So be humble, treat people well, remember your mortality.
It adds such a profound emotional weight to the house. You have the manufactured romance of Dorothy, the terrified protection of the witch marks, and then this deep philosophical acceptance of mortality in the chapel.
It's a complete psychological profile of the medieval and Tudor mind, written in stone and plaster and paint.
And speaking of visual profiles, we have to talk about how the rest of the world knows Haddon Hall. Because even if our listeners have never been to Derbyshire, they have almost certainly seen this house.
Oh, almost certainly. If you have watched a period drama set in England any time in the last 30 years, you've likely been on a virtual tour of Haddon Hall.
It is the go-to filming location.
And it's for that exact reason we've been discussing. Because it was never modernized, it requires almost zero set dressing. If you're a director and you need an authentic medieval courtyard, you go to Haddon.
You don't have to digitally remove the TV aerials from the roof.
You don't have to hide the radiator pipes. You don't have to cover up the light switches. They simply aren't there. It's ready to go.
So let's list some of the big ones. The one everyone mentions is The Princess Bride.
A beloved classic. Haddon Hall was used as Prince Humperdinck's castle. The scene where Wesley, played by Cary Elwes, is fighting the Cadley Guards. That's all Haddon. Elwes actually said in an interview, and I'm quoting here, "The place was almost like a movie set in itself."
Jane Eyre seems to be a recurring one. It's been filmed there multiple times.
It is the definitive Thornfield Hall. It's been used in 3 separate major adaptations. The Franco Zeffirelli film in 1996, the brilliant BBC series in 2006, and the Cary Fukunaga film with Michael Fassbender in 2011.
Why Jane Eyre specifically? What makes it the perfect Thornfield?
Think about the mood of that book. Thornfield Hall is supposed to be ancient, gloomy, oppressive, and secretive. It's a house that literally holds a dark secret in the attic.
Right.
Haddon, with its dark, imposing oak paneling, its high defensive walls, and its shadowy corners, it just captures that Gothic brooding quality perfectly. Somewhere like Chatsworth is too pretty, too light. Haddon looks like it has secrets.
It's also been a Mary Queen of Scots.
The other Boleyn girl.
Elizabeth with Kate Blanchett.
Basically, if your script has people in ruffs and doublets, Haddon Hall's phone is the first one you call.
It's interesting, isn't it? Haddon Hall has effectively colonized our collective visual imagination. When I close my eyes and I picture Tudor England, the image that comes to mind is probably a shot from one of those films. I'm picturing Haddon Hall.
It has become the archetype, the platonic ideal of a medieval manor.
So we've unpacked a massive amount here today. We've traveled to Derbyshire, we've met the Peverils and the Vernons, we've had a feast with the King of the Peak, we've thoroughly debunked the Dorothy Vernon elopement, but also understood how that fiction became essential to the house's identity.
And we've looked at the ghosts, from world-changing prophetic visions to these quiet, strange, time-slipping children, and we've seen the literal marks of fear, the witch marks.
It's a dense, complicated, and layered place.
Very.
So what does it all mean? When we look at a place like Haddon Hall, what's the big takeaway?
For me, I think Haddon Hall is a powerful lesson in the value of pausing. In a world that is obsessed with updating, renovating, modernizing, and improving, Haddon proves the incredible value of just letting things be. By doing nothing to it for 200 years, the Manor's family achieved something truly unique. They saved a piece of the past, authentically.
And that leads me right to my final thought for you to chew on. I want to go back to that time slip concept.
Okay, I'm with you.
We talked about how the physical environment, the stone, the light, the air, hasn't changed. And we talked about how that might allow us, in the present, to see a window into the past. But I want to flip that around.
Go on.
If Haddon Hall has remained physically unchanged for 900 years, is it possible that the ghosts aren't spirits returning from the afterlife to haunt us? Is it possible that the past is simply still happening there? That time isn't a straight line, but a stack of layers, all coexisting in the same space?
Like the pages of a book, all bound together by the house itself.
Exactly. If the walls of the Long Gallery are the same, maybe the year 1563 is still unfolding in that room on its own frequency right now. And maybe, just maybe, when we walk through today, the people at that masquerade ball see a flicker, and the ghosts are us. Strange, transparent people in jeans and T-shirts drifting through their party.
That is a haunting thought. That from their perspective, we are the ghosts in their reality.
And at Haddon Hall, where the stage has never been struck and the scenery has never changed, that illusion, or perhaps that reality, is stronger and more plausible than anywhere else on Earth.
It certainly makes you want to walk a little more quietly and respectfully through those courtyards.
It really does. Well, that is our deep dive into the sleeping beauty of Derbyshire, the incredible Haddon Hall.
It was a fascinating trip back in time.
Thanks for listening. Watch out for those daisy wheels, keep a close eye on the shadows, and we'll see you on the next one.